Texas, 1881. The last livestock auction of autumn was winding down under a sun that baked every shadow flat and silent. Horses neighed, cattle bawled, and men barked over prices with whiskey breath and worn boots. Dust clung to every crease and collar. The corral gates groaned with wear. Caleb Warwick didn't belong to this kind of noise. 35 carved from red clay and solitude, he came to town only when the pantry was empty or a horse was needed. He had no kin, no debts, and no taste for talk, just a man with the weight of a rifle, a scar he never named, and 200 acres of wind. He was ready to leave when he saw her. What did you think of this opening scene? Like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Not the mare, though she stood trembling and the pen ribs sharp under her hide flanks striped with dried blood. No Caleb had seen sick horses before. What stopped him cold was the girl just beyond the rail. She couldn't have been more than 19, barefoot, dust-caked. Her hair clung to her face in matted strands and her dress hung torn at the hem. She didn't cry, didn't flinch. Her eyes, wide and far off, weren't looking at the mare. They were following something no one else could see. Beside her stood a man reeking of sweat and rye bottle in one hand, rope in the other. The rope was tied not to livestock, but to the girl's wrist. "Dumb one here," the drunk hollered to no one in particular. "Come out of my first wife, don't talk, don't hear neither. But she cleans, cooks, don't sass, cheap." A few men chuckled darkly. One spat, another muttered, "Ain't right." Caleb turned to walk away. He had no need for this. He came for a horse, not a burden. But then it hit him. Not a word, not a cry, just a glance. The girl was looking at him. There was no begging in her face, no hope, no plea. Just a look, level and still, a look that somehow saw straight through him. It wasn't pity, it wasn't fear, it was understanding, or maybe recognition. The drunk staggered forward, dragging the girl's wrist. "You got coin, horse comes with her. Hell, I ain't dragging her back. Not worth the dust on her toes." Caleb hesitated. The mare snorted, pawed at the ground. The girl didn't move, didn't blink. He looked back at the drunk. "I'll take both." The laughter from nearby men was loud and low. "You buying livestock or starting a harem, Caleb?" He didn't answer. He just counted out coins, enough for a horse, not enough for a soul. The man let go of the rope. "She's yours now. Don't say I didn't warn you." The girl flinched as the drunk tossed the rope toward her, but she didn't run. She stepped behind Caleb like a shadow might, silent and deliberate. He untied the rope from her wrist, tossed it to the dirt. Then he led the mare out. The girl followed. She carried nothing, not a bag, not a past, only a thin shawl across her shoulders and a silence thick enough to cut. At his wagon, she paused. He opened the back. She climbed in without a word, folded into a corner like someone practiced in vanishing. He climbed up to the driver's bench. Just as he reached for the reins, he felt it a tug on his coat. He looked down. Her fingers, small, calloused, had brushed his sleeve. Once. She wasn't looking at him now. Her eyes were on the horizon. But that touch said what words: "Never could I trust you." Caleb Warwick, who hadn't been touched by kindness in 8 years, felt something shift. He snapped the reins. The wagon creaked. The wheels crunched dry earth rolling out of town. Behind him, the girl curled beneath the blanket. She never looked back. Neither did he. What do you think of Caleb and Lila's first encounter? Drop a like or comment to let us know. When they reached the ranch, dusk had settled like ash. The sky stretched wide and rust-colored clouds bleeding into the horizon. His land was nothing special, a crooked roof house, a few outbuildings, and a pasture where cattle moved like ghosts. But it was clean quiet. He helped her down, watched to see if she'd bolt, but she stepped lightly, calm. Her eyes roamed the land, not with fear but with knowing, like she was mapping it from the inside out. Inside, he stoked the kitchen fire, pointed to the kettle. She nodded, found the cups without being told, as if she'd always belonged near warmth. After supper, he pulled a piece of chalk from the cabinet, tapped the door frame. "Name," he said. She stared at him a long moment, then crouched. With careful fingers, she wrote a single word in soft, slanted letters, "Lila." He read it once, then again. "Lila," he said aloud. She gave no smile, just turned and walked out to the barn shawl trailing behind her like smoke. The first night passed without words. Caleb rose early, found her already outside, standing in the frost-bitten morning, barefoot in the dirt beside the barn. She wasn't waiting. She was watching. The same way animals did, still ears perked, breath shallow. The bay mare stood beside her, the one from the auction, lame, skittish. Most would have put her down, but Lila knelt beside the beast, cloth in hand, wiping blood from her flank with quiet patience. She didn't speak, didn't sign, just moved with rhythm, slow, steady, as if her hands could hear what her ears could not. Caleb leaned on the barn door, arms crossed. He'd seen seasoned ranch hands get kicked to hell for less. But the mare stayed still, huffing steam, letting Lila wrap the swollen leg. Maybe she couldn't hear, but damn if she didn't understand. That day, Caleb gave her chores, nothing heavy, wash the floorboards, boil water, sweep the tack room. She did each one without complaint, without question, without sound. Every motion efficient, every movement intentional, like she'd been doing this forever. At night, he left chalk for her. In the quiet, she'd write small notes in the margins of their world, bacon low. Dog limping, wind smells like dust. He'd read them each morning like prayers. She didn't fill the silence. She belonged to it. A week passed. Then came the storm. It started how Texas storms always do. Slow, deceitful, a stillness in the air, a tension in the wheat. By sundown, the clouds were stacking like bruises above the hills. Caleb was in the cattle shed checking a sick calf when she appeared. Lila barefoot, eyes wide, mouth tight, breath fast. She tugged hard at his sleeve. What he asked, startled. She pointed upward toward the roof, hands shaking. "What is it?" She didn't answer, just pulled again, urgent, and then it hit a crack, not thunder, not yet, something else, a shatter. Lightning split the sky like a blade, slamming into the tree behind the shed. The ground kicked, fire leapt, bark exploded, the calves screamed. Caleb stumbled back, stunned. Through the smoke, he saw her standing just beyond the doorway, face lit orange by firelight, eyes unmoving. She had known, not guessed, not sensed, known. She'd pulled him from death with no words, no warning, just knowing. That night, when the flames had died and the cattle were calm, he sat beside her at the table, chalk untouched. He didn't ask her how she knew. She wouldn't have answered. But her silence said enough. There were kinds of listening deeper than sound. Caleb, for the first time in years, felt heard. How does Lila's intuition resonate with you, like, or comment to share your thoughts? Days passed, then weeks. The quiet didn't stretch between them anymore. It wrapped around them like a fence, protection, not distance. Lila kept to the rhythm. She rose with the sun, brushed the horses, boiled the water before he woke. She gathered mint leaves, trained the yearlings with a kind of body language no cowboy had ever taught. She'd stand near them, hands out, palms open, and wait. And they'd come every time. Caleb started paying attention, not with suspicion, but curiosity. One morning, the head cow stopped eating. Caleb chalked it up to cold. Lila didn't. She led the cow to the birthing stall, drew water laced with herbs, and stroked its belly with the same gentle circle she used on that first mare. By nightfall, the cow was in labor. She'd known again. Caleb said nothing, but something shifted in his chest, something that felt suspiciously like awe. He went into town a few days later, came back with his jaw tight, shoulders stiff. The sheriff had been dropping half-truths about the land whispers of war claims blood what his father had taken. Caleb didn't say a word about it, but that night he sat on the porch staring into dusk, guilt wrapped around him like an old coat. She came and stood beside him, not close, not far, just enough. After a while, she placed her hand on his shoulder, light, steady. He didn't look at her. "How'd you know I was feeling shame?" he muttered. She didn't answer, just moved her hand from his shoulder to his chest, right over his heart. Then she turned, walking toward the oak where his father was buried beneath the dirt and the silence. She had never read the name carved into the stone, had never asked. But she knew. That night he dreamed of cannon fire and scorched hills. His father's voice came through the smoke, proud and shaking. "I gave you the land, and I gave you the blood on it." Caleb woke, gasping. She was there, sitting by the hearth. A candle burned between them, and beside it a blue handkerchief trimmed in lace his mother's locked away in a cedar chest no one had touched in a decade. How he rasped. She didn't answer, didn't need to. He understood. Some wounds don't bleed, they hum, they ache, they whisper. And Lila had heard them all. After that, Caleb feared only one thing, losing the only person who knew his pain. Before he ever spoke it. The whisper came slow, like sickness. "She stares too long at the cattle," murmured the blacksmith's wife, folding cloth beneath her porch, like she knows which one'll drop next. It was only a murmur, but in a town like theirs, whispers moved faster than horses. By week's end, the preacher's boy added fuel. "She touched our goat," he said, voice sharp as flint. 2 days later, it birthed early. That ain't natural. No one had ever heard Lila speak, and the less she said, the more the town spoke for her. At the store, a woman pulled her child behind her skirt when Lila passed, though she only came for flour. At the post, a man spat near her feet. She never flinched, but Caleb saw it, the way her fingers curled tighter around her basket, the way her steps got quieter, as if trying to vanish into a land that didn't want her. He said nothing. She never asked. Maybe she already knew. The world had never been kind to quiet things. Then the fever came. A ranch hand's boy, not more than 7, red-faced and shivering, seizing, crying in a voice no one could soothe. The doctor was gone east, weeks from return. It wasn't the preacher, wasn't the blacksmith, it was Lila who came. She didn't ask, just walked into the barn where the boy lay thrashing, knelt beside him, laid her hand on his chest, then his brow, closed her eyes. When she opened them, she left cut herbs from Caleb's wall, lavender, fever, few rabbit tobacco. Steeped them in hot water and returned. The boy drank. By dawn, he was sitting up, sweat drying, hunger in his belly. His mother wept, held Lila's hand, said thank you a dozen times between tears. The next morning, the same woman was whispering at the well. She didn't ask what was wrong, didn't wait for signs. How did she know the miracle had a shadow? And it was fear. 3 days later, they came, 8 of them, men and women with boots heavy on frozen earth. They didn't carry torches lit, but held them like promises. Caleb saw them from the barn, stepped outside, unshaven hands. Calloused face carved from days without sleep. Leading them was old Mr. Harrow, a man whose own daughter hadn't spoken to him in years. "We want her gone," he said. Caleb didn't move. "Why?" "She hears things." Harrow snapped. "She shouldn't. She's mute." "That ain't the same as deaf," another man muttered. "She sees storms before the sky changes, talks to animals like they answer." "A steer of mine dropped dead last week. She was the last one to touch it." "You think she cursed it?" Caleb asked flat. "I think she's cursed. Period." Inside the cabin behind the curtain, Lila stood. She'd heard the crunch of gravel under boots, seen their face not twisted in hate, Worse certainty. She stepped toward the door. Caleb raised a hand. Not yet. He walked forward, boots sinking in thawing mud. You're afraid of her, he said quietly. We're afraid of what she is. Harrow's eyes narrowed. She saved that child, or gave him the fever a woman snapped. Caleb didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She's the only person I know who listens, he said. Not with ears, with her hands, with her breath, with her whole damn soul. The crowd stilled. I've lived 35 years, he continued. I can count on one hand the number of people who ever heard me, not just my words, but my regrets, my silences. He turned, gestured toward the cabin. She did without saying a thing. He looked at them now, not with anger, but disappointment deep as drought. You want to run someone off for being different, for seeing the world you're too scared to look at, fine. But you'll have to go through me. Harrow opened his mouth, closed it. No one moved. One by one the crowd drifted back, torches, unlit, boots heavier. That night silence ruled the ranch, but not the cold kind, not anymore. Lila placed warm cider by the fire, sat beside Caleb. Said nothing, didn't sign, didn't write. After a long while, she reached across the table and rested her fingers on his hand. Not thanks, recognition. He turned his palm upward, curled his fingers around hers. They sat like that, two souls in quiet, louder than any crowd. What did you think of Caleb standing up for Lila? Share your thoughts with a like or comment. Winter settled like ash, soft and slow. Most days they moved in rhythm. She wrote small notes by the door each morning. Today will be kind. I can feel it. Most days she was right, and when she wasn't, Caleb trusted the trying. The ranch didn't grow busier, just fuller. One gray morning, Amos Tully limped up the drive, one arm limp. The docks east, Caleb called from the porch. What do you want? Amos nodded past him toward where Lila knelt by the herb patch. Heard she fixes things. Quiet. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, just walked to Amos, examined the shoulder, pressed gently. He winced. 2 days later, he returned with jerky and a thank you he couldn't say aloud. Then came the widow. Said she hadn't slept in weeks, couldn't breathe past the grief. Lila didn't speak, just sat beside her at dusk, hands light on her shoulders, steady. By morning, the woman returned with a scarf and a pie. For the girl, she said, the one who hears more than we do. Still, some feared her, but fewer now. And fear, when met with kindness, doesn't always stay. Winter clung to the ridges like a dog to a bone, but inside the ranch house, life stirred with quiet purpose. Most mornings, Lila wrote a line of chalk across the wooden board beside the door, her ritual small but steady. Today will be good. I can feel it. And somehow most days she was right. She made no sermons, offered no claims. She simply moved through the world like she belonged to it. And that in time changed everything. The children came first, not by design, not in numbers, just 1 or 2 at a time, stragglers from town trailing curiosity and muddy boots. They didn't come for lessons. They came to watch. They watched her thread needles through torn fabric, line the chicken coop with pine needles, move through the stables like wind, never in a rush, never loud. They saw how animals listened to her, and slowly they began to as well. Lila didn't teach with words. She taught with being, with stillness, with silence, and the rare, precious way she smiled when a child understood something without being told. They asked no questions, but they always returned. Caleb built a bench beneath the cottonwood behind the house. That's where they sat most evenings, he and Lila, shoulder to shoulder, watching the sun settle into hills, like a coin into a deep pocket. He'd pour 2 mugs of tea and she would rest her hand on his. Her thumb traced circles on the back of his knuckles, slow, thoughtful, like she was reading something written beneath his skin. Some nights he brought out his old harmonica, played tunes with no name. and she would close her eyes, swaying slightly like she could feel the song instead of hearing it. And maybe she could. It wasn't all easy. There were still glances, still whispers, but they no longer carried weight. Because Lila's silence was not absence, it was presence. She planted herbs with intention, showed the children how to read the twitch of a rabbit's nose, calmed the wildest horse with the curve of her hand. She gave the town something it didn't know it had lost, stillness that listened back. Then came the boy, 7 years old, vanished on a Sunday. The church bell had just finished ringing when the first screams rose. One boot near the tree line, nothing more. By midday, the town was frantic. Mothers cried, men shouted, dogs barked and failed. When word reached the ranch, Caleb grabbed his coat, but Lila was already moving. She placed her palm on his arm, then dropped to her knees in the snow outside the barn. She pressed both hands to the earth, wrist, forearm, like it was breathing. Then she crawled forward slow, scanning the land. Caleb stood, then followed. Others joined. She never looked back, never spoke. Through cedar groves, over frozen creek beds, across thorn and stone. Until at last, in a clearing of bowed trees, they saw him. The boy curled under a bent trunk, cold, frightened, alive. She ran first, checked his breath, his ankle brushed hair from his eyes. No celebration, no applause, just relief. When they carried the boy back, no one called her strange. They called her the girl who hears with her heart. That spring, things changed in small but real ways. Amos Tully brought a broken knife to Caleb, not the blacksmith. The widow came once a week with fresh bread. Even the blacksmith's wife nodded once, just once, when Lila passed. No one asked her to speak. No one needed to anymore. One late afternoon, Caleb rode out to check the ridge fences. Sky was clear, air calm, but halfway back his horse startled, spooked by something unseen, and reared. He landed hard, shoulder first, breath knocked clean from him. By the time he staggered home, dusk was falling and blood soaked his sleeve. She met him at the steps, no alarm, no gasp. She simply knew. Led him inside, peeled the cloth from his arm, cleaned the wound with pine sap and crushed yarrow. He watched her, dazed from pain, and something else, something harder to name. "You always know," he whispered. She didn't answer, didn't need to. She lifted his hand, pressed it gently to her cheek, then brought her lips to the edge of his wound, soft, sure. The fire crackled. The room held its breath, held its sinew. Later, as the storm rolled in, they sat across from each other. He reached into his desk drawer, pulled a sheet of paper. He wrote slowly, deliberately, turned it so she could see. "I want to hear your heart, if you'll let me listen with mine." She stared at the words, then reached out, touched each letter one by one. When her eyes lifted, they were wet, but not from sorrow. She smiled, not a polite smile, not a thank you, a sunrise smile, the kind that only comes when something inside you finally breaks free. And Caleb smiled back, quiet and full. Two lives once silent finally heard. The last frost melted slow that year, reluctant to let go. But the ranch breathed easier, and in that breathing something sacred took root. Each morning Lila wrote her daily promise on the slate beside the door. That day it read, "The wind will be kind." And it was. She taught Caleb to sign simple words, at first water, fire, thank you. Her fingers moved like branches in wind. He fumbled, clumsy as a new colt. But she never laughed, only guided his hands until they learned. He taught her to ride. The first time she gripped the saddle horn, tight knuckles white. But he walked beside her, speaking soft even if she couldn't hear. Her body found the rhythm of the horse, learned it the way she learned everything else, with her skin, her breath, her bones. They built a small room onto the cabin, a space for reading, eating, resting, a place that didn't need words. There by firelight they shared meals in silence more intimate than conversation. Their glances said more than language ever could. One evening he signed a sentence. You make this place full." She paused, then touched her fingers to his lips. Not a kiss, just a thank you, a way of saying I hear you too. The next storm came fast. Caleb had fallen asleep near the fire after mending fence all day. The sky gave no warning. The lantern flickered low. He woke to her hand on his shoulder. Lila. She was already pulling his coat on him, signing fast barn. Now. Outside, the wind had shifted wrong electric. The horses kicked and shrieked inside the barn. Lila moved between them, calming each with touch and breath. Above them, the old roof groaned. Caleb looked up, a crack, a warning. "We need to move them," he shouted. She was already leading the mare out, signing again, roof. Falling. Now. The last horse cleared the gate just as the beam gave way. The roof caved in. They stood outside, soaked to the bone, breath misting in the cold air. He looked at her, really looked. She was grounded, not afraid, not shaken, part of the storm and somehow beyond it. "How did you know?" he asked, stunned. She touched her chest, then pointed to the sky. He understood. She didn't hear like others, she felt deeper. And that night, wrapped in wool and wonder, he held her hand and signed, "You belong to this land." She smiled, then placed his hand on her chest. And for the first time, he felt her rhythm, a beat as old as wind. The town shifted in silence, not loudly, not all at once, but truly. Amos came back with a gift, new leather reins. The widow left preserves by the gate. Children brought drawings of horses and herbs. Lila never asked for thanks, she just kept being, and that somehow was enough. Then came the Sunday that sealed it all. A snowstorm had swallowed the valley overnight. When the fog lifted, a boy was missing again. The town turned toward the ranch without hesitation. She didn't speak, didn't pause, just walked to the barn, dropped to the snow, pressed her palms to the ground. After a breath, she stood, pointed west. No one questioned. They followed. 3 miles through pine and frost, they found him tucked beneath a log, blue-lipped but breathing alive. This time, no one whispered, no one feared. They simply nodded and began to believe. Years passed, but no one tracked them. They measured time in moments, the smell of coffee at dawn, the warmth of her hand in his, the hush of dusk under cottonwood branches. Caleb walked slower now, Lila's hair silvered like winter grass, but their bond never dimmed. She taught more children, not with rules, but with watching. She showed them how to listen, not with ears, but with their being, to feel the twitch of a rabbit's fear, to steady a spooked colt, to trust what they couldn't name. One boy asked her once, "Miss Lila, how do you know when something's wrong?" She simply smiled, placed his hand on his chest, then hers, and waited. He understood. Most evenings they sat beneath the cottonwood tea, warm in hand. Sometimes Caleb played his harmonica. She'd close her eyes, swaying to a song she couldn't hear, but always felt. One dusk she turned to him. Her lips moved slow, uncertain, shaped by years of silence. "I do not need sound, only you." Caleb blinked, throat tight. He nodded. "I hear you," he said. "Always have." And that was love, not the kind etched in stone or shouted through chapels, but the kind that walked beside you, that laid its hand on your grief and stayed, the kind that never asked to be noticed, only felt in quiet glances, in shared breath, in the wind that whispered, "You are no longer alone." When the old folks in town told stories, they no longer called her strange. They called her the one who listens with her heart. Some still shook their heads, but most just smiled, left pies, and stayed long enough to leave lighter than they came. And so the tale of Caleb and Lila wasn't carved on a tombstone or shouted through town. It lived in the land, in the silence, in every child who learned to feel before they spoke. It lived still. Because the truest love is not the loudest, it is the one that stays, the one that listens back, the one that never leaves. The story of Caleb, Warwick, and Lila offers profound lessons about the power of empathy, understanding, and the beauty of silent connection. It teaches us that true listening transcends words, as Lila's ability to feel and respond to the world around her, be it animals, people, or the land itself, shows that communication is not just about sound, but about presence and intention. Their bond, built on quiet recognition rather than grand gestures, highlights that love is found in steadfast companionship and mutual respect for each other's silences. The story also reminds us to embrace differences rather than fear them, as Lila's unique way of perceiving the world transforms a skeptical town into one that learns to value her gifts. It underscores the importance of kindness and patience in overcoming prejudice, showing how actions rooted in compassion can change hearts. Ultimately, the tale celebrates the enduring strength of human connection that doesn't demand words, but thrives in shared understanding, urging us to listen with our hearts. What lessons did this story spark for you? Like, share, subscribe, and comment on the video to join the conversation.